was your how was your flight there?
My flight was actually pretty good. It was a short flight because I always sleep on the plane.
Yeah. How you know if you caught COVID if your mouth is wide open while you knocked out?
Well, first of all, I know my mouth isn't open, but I have my
You don't
mask
know
on.
that.
Yes, when I'm asleep, because my head is
You know
still
how many?
doing this.
Yeah, but
So-
when you knocked out, like when you extra tired,
But I
your mouth
wasn't-
opens up like.
But I wasn't extra tired.
You know how many mouths I've seen open in the middle of the night? Not that I'm going into the details of it, but
Okay, for this topic, you might not want to use that type.
I'm just saying. I'm not. You know, I'm not like Kevin Bacon and nobody though.
No, we are not.
This ain't House of Cards or nothing. You know, I ain't the Subway dude. You know,
I was
but
okay on the plane. I had my mask on. I had my little nap, but it was a short flight.
okay, all right. So
You starting already?
I mean, this is the nature of the conversation. That's why we bring you in, man. So we can have a little fun.
Yes, we will get into some people with their mouths open at night, but hopefully they not sleep.
I like the sound of that. I'm not gonna go any deeper than where you left at.
But
right
you know
there.
what? If it goes deeper, it's okay, because if you know proper technique,
Not if they choke.
then some people are okay with choking. You know, that gets into something totally different as well. As long as it's consensual and all of the safe words are in place. Hey.
Listen, all right. I think we can go ahead and start the show.
All right.
Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go.
TODT Live special edition, y'all.
Gotta go. It be no hating
Y'all know what it
on
is.
my life, you gotta go.
Hey,
Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go, you gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go.
yeah.
Go,
Like and share the show.
gotta go. It be no hating on my life, you gotta go. Go.
Hey man, it's TODT Live, man. D Stanfield, the professional, is in the building. Y'all knew it was coming. Actually, y'all asked for it. So we back in the building, man. It's D Stanfield, TODT Live, Rise Up Family Platform. We have our special guest back in the building, Dr. Joy, aka Lynette Chester. I don't know if I should have did that the other way around, but hey.
No, that's actually right.
Okay.
Yeah, it's my whole government name. Just put it on out there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, we copied you into the we tagged you into the promo. So I mean, it's not like we had a choice there in the matter.
Nothing to hide. Open book.
Before we get started, man, I know you. For everybody that is wondering why Dr. Joy is in the building looking like a ninja with the bedroom candy mask on, is because she's, as usual, she's been on the move. So she flew in. If you didn't hear the pre-dialogue, she flew in from D.C., right?
Yes.
Okay. And out of a precautionary measure to make sure that I don't get anything and to try to make sure that I don't give her anything, she's wearing a mask, you know, keeping it covered up, as most of y'all probably should be doing as we speak.
Absolutely. Keep everything safe.
Because it's kind of like I'm pretty sure that there's some people doing some things that we don't necessarily. Well, we're not gonna avoid the conversation around it. You feel me? But listen, like and share the show, man. It's TODT Live special edition, man. We got special guest Dr. Joy, aka Lynette Chester, in the building, and we've been we brought you back in for two reasons. Number one, the continuation of the conversation that we had a couple months ago. Not even a couple months.
It's been a full year.
It
was August.
Because we were supposed to do this a while back, and then COVID kind of put a big wrench into that.
Yeah.
So it's prolonged it, but it doesn't matter. You're here now, so we're gonna have this conversation. We're gonna answer some of the questions that were asked over a year ago. Hopefully those individuals got answers to those questions while they were in the interim. But if you didn't, you're gonna get those unadulterated answers tonight. And let's be clear, it is 11:54. Okay, Dr. Joy has been traveling. She's been on the move as usual. So I want y'all to understand that it's late night, and it will be a late night conversation. Okay, there will be no holds barred. So if you got children up watching the show right now, put them to bed, unless you want them to be as unadulterated and prepared for the world as what we intend to go forward with. So just make sure y'all get ready for that. All right. So
I can't even play with a filter right now. It's just gonna come out. It's just diarrhea of the mouth.
I feel you. All right.
That's what you're gonna get.
There's a lot of liquid. You know what? All right, let's move on. So, as you all know, TODT is in the middle of the financial empowerment series. There's a lot going on in the world. COVID's going on. Potential recession, which is kind of reminds us of 2006 through 2010, if you will. And what I mean by that, just to give everybody a little insight, is in 2006, 2005, 2004, housing market was going great. People were making tons of money. Everybody seemed like they were doing well. But behind the scenes, there was a lot of debauchery going on, or just plum fuckery going on. And as a result, in 2008, everything came to a crash and halt. And a lot of people lost jobs. A lot of people lost lives. There was suicide and everything going on. And if you were not in control of your destiny, so to speak, if you were not in control of your assets, your finances, a lot of people suffered during those times. But there were people that did not suffer, that actually thrived during those times because they positioned themselves correctly. They did the things that other people were not willing to do so that they could have the things and have the peace of mind that other people just did not have in those times. And so we want to have those conversations with the guests that we have, and bringing you back with it just seems like a great thing because you are a serial entrepreneur. I know you to have even from a family aspect, 9 to 5 just don't work for you. From a traditional lifestyle don't work for you. If we honest, if we keeping it a buck, right?
Ain't nothing normal about
nothing normal whatsoever. Never mind.
My temperature ain't even normal. I'm a 97.7 girl.
Okay, as long as it's not 99, we good. Because I got the scanner. If you no. So without further ado. This is not a normal TODT episode, so we're not going to get into what's going on in your town, what's going on in my town. I think we know what's going on in D.C., and this is a bunch of fuckery. So with that being said, let's focus on the guest at hand. So in our previous conversation, we talked a lot about about what your expertise is and different suggestions that you have for people that function in a romance or sexual lifestyle or just relationships, period. But we know nothing about you. So I kind of want to get into that because this is more so about the entrepreneur, Dr. Joy. So can you tell us your story?
So the short version of my story is being an entrepreneur is in my blood. Okay. So my father is an entrepreneur and my mother did a traditional job. And so I saw how growing up, needing to have what I consider a balance in order to get certain things done on the benefit side, because my mother worked for the telephone company. If you know anything about that industry, telephone company, transportation, like, those were good benefits and union jobs and many, different positions. And so that was like that security piece that you didn't have with being an entrepreneur. But with being an entrepreneur, I saw a lot of the freedom that you didn't get with the 9 to 5. And so growing up and really having to, at the age of 6, when I knew my alphabet, I was filing. My father had a pager company. That's how old I am. And I'm sorry, a beeper company. And when
there is a difference.
Yeah, there's a difference. It was beepers first. And when it was time for your bill to be due, you would get a beep. Somebody would contact you, and I was the person dialing the number. He had an answering service. I would sometimes answer the phone at the answering service at like 10 years old. So every time I had a skill, it was put to work. And I was learning at a very young age how what I now use the term transferable skills are things that when I was learning it in school, I was able to apply it in a way that was real life, making a difference in a real situation to bring in some income.
So it's safe to say that it was a conscious effort on your dad to embed in you a mindset early on to not necessarily to be an entrepreneur, but to be able to monetize your skills and gifts, or be able to understand that everything that you do can be put to work in an essence. Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair, but I don't want to say that it was intentional. Okay. I think what all parents do is they try to expose their children to as many things as possible that matches their personality type, and whatever the child latches onto, they try to make that into something or allow the child to grow even more into it. And so because around, I would say 12, started pulling in more creativity and then giving my father different suggestions. And then by the time I was in high school, before high school, I wrote a principal a letter that said I wanted to go to not the same school that I was zoned for, a different school. That principal called my mother because he thought my mother had written that letter. And so he was like, if your daughter wrote this, then absolutely, we want her at this school. I then learned how to navigate a system where I didn't have to do what everybody else was doing. And that was also something else that I learned.
I'm going to need you to elaborate on that.
Okay. So traditionally, if you're zoned to go to this particular high school, that's just where you go.
Right.
But, and I don't know why, I wrote a letter to a principal at a total different school in a different zone and said, can I come to your school? Okay.
And nothing, you can't recall anything that prompted you to write that letter?
Well, I didn't want to go to that other school.
The school that you were currently at?
The school where I was zoned, because this is middle school going to high school.
Okay.
So instead of going to that particular high school, which is also the same. I'm going to speak
directly into the mic. So there you go.
That's also the same high school that my sister went to.
Okay.
So I knew about that school. I didn't want to go there.
Okay.
So I wrote the letter, but in writing that letter, I learned about exceptions to the rule. Because keep in mind, I was also in a program that took me 45 minutes away from my home so that I can be in a better school.
Got you. Okay. So what happened after that?
I kept being the exception to the rule. So I started high school early, which meant I graduated early, which also meant that I could work while I was in high school because my electives didn't have to be what everybody else was doing because I was already on a different track. So I worked at Fortune 500 companies while I was 16 years old. I drove a brand new car to school while I was 16 years old. I was 45 minutes away from my home and knew how to call the school and tell them when I didn't want to be there and I wanted to be at Dunkin' Donuts, Joy is going to be late at school. I learned how to navigate, maneuver, buck the system to the point where then even going to college, I didn't do what anybody expected me to do.
So is it safe to say, well, let me ask you this, because when we talk about gifts, there's oftentimes a quorum or quarrel or an argument as to whether people are born with gifts or it's inbred into them. Part of what you said seems like there were things that were put into your environment that prompted you to think outside of the box or to push to do things that weren't necessarily the norm. The other part of what you said though is you naturally saying, I just don't want to do. I want to be disruptive. So this is not what I want to do. So how can I persevere? So can you kind of elaborate on that piece?
Yeah, so because there's actually something I think that's in the middle. So you got what I'm hearing, the nature and the nurture part. My environment was something though that my parents also controlled.
Right.
Where when I wanted to be an exception, because I was already a minority doing something different and being an exception in that environment, I also didn't have some of those same consequences that I would have had if I was in a different environment trying to buck the system.
Ah, okay.
So this goes into something that's totally different, but when we start talking about opportunities within zip codes,
right.
My parents took me out of the zip code that we lived in and put me in a different zip code so that I can explore some different opportunities. So me bucking the system when I got expelled, but sat in front of a board, and don't ask me what I got expelled for because I see it in your eyes.
I don't even know why you told me not to ask you that. You said this is unadulterated talk. I'm going to ask. I don't care if you ask me that.
Look, their record is when I was a minor.
This is not a court of law. You can't just keep stuff secretive because you.
Wait, if the people ask, then I'll answer.
Hey, listen, if you guys want to know why Dr. Joy got expelled from school, post it in the comment section right now. Because she is not going to answer this question unless people post it in the comment section. I want to know. We want to know. Let me put it up on the screen so you. Letitia, shout out to Letitia Wilder, Rise Up Family Platform, man. We want to know. So please tell us why you got expelled from school, Dr. Joy.
So it was a drinking incident, and I wasn't drinking. I was the mixologist. So we went on a choir trip. What age was this? This was 14.
Wait a damn minute. What did you know about mixing at age 14?
That you don't mix light and dark. So I told them.
Is that how relationships should operate?
No.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I told them because the mini bar was open at this hotel where we were going for a choir trip, and they wanted to put like the gin with the dark rum, and I was like, no. When we get to the school tomorrow where we're supposed to be practicing, we will get some Coke, and they had orange juice in the machine. So then brought it back to the room. Now, I didn't drink it. I just mixed the drinks for everybody.
Oh.
But, it's a drinking incident.
And right on time, Letitia Wilder puts in the comment section, yes, the loophole. You know what? Now you're being an enabler, Letitia. I'm taking you off the screen right now. Hey, you listening to TODT Live, Talking to Town. I'm D. Stanford, the professional. I'm here with Dr. Joy. So we're talking about how she got expelled from school and how she was a certified thug mixologist.
But no, let me tell you the moral to this story, though, and how this really ties together.
Okay.
So although I was recommended for expulsion, my father at the board meeting said, look, she knows what she did. She took the consequence. When you look at her record, she hasn't done anything like this before. I know she won't do anything like this again. If you expel her, what are her options? What's going to happen? And I'm a great student because remember, I'm ahead of what I should be when I'm 14.
Right.
I wrote a letter to get into, I'm in honors classes and all of this other stuff. So I got back into the school.
So you got expelled. Your pops had to come to school like my grandmother has on several occasions. And but we ain't talking about me today.
Well, actually, I was at the alternative school those 10 days.
Oh, okay.
Because that's like the due process.
Okay, yes, I've been there too. Yep. No, all right. Yeah. Okay. So you come back to the school. You graduate early.
Yes, with college credit. With working
how many college credits have you on?
I don't even remember, but I know it was at least 14 hours because I could have been like a second semester freshman.
It had got like 2 more credits.
But I wanted everything to be an elective. Because see, the other thing was, it was not just the, like what we call now dual enrollment. It wasn't just the high school courses that I also took for college credit. I graduated from high school early. So I was actually on a college campus because I was going to summer school. I was doing what they call like a 7th hour. And because school was boring to me. I was the one that I would do my homework before the class started because you had those teachers that were like, do the odd problems because the even answers was in the back of the book. And I did all of them. And before class started, I was like, look, here it is. And can I get a pass to the library? And I would be in my car at Dunkin' Donuts.
To the lie. That's what you want to pass to the lie. That's just, all right, man.
Well, I'd be in the weight room. I was a manager for 3 years too. Football, basketball, track.
Jesus Christ. Shout out to Letitia Wilder, man. Shout out to Ron Thomas. Shout out to Irv Goldie Hawkins for Fresh Perspective, man. You're listening to TODT Live, Talk of the Town. I'm your host, D. Stanford, the professional. Here with Dr. Joy. So we kind of going through your story. So you got to college. Well, let me ask.
Still bucking the system, even in college.
How so?
So freshmen were not supposed to have a car on campus. I got my car on campus.
I too did. Yeah, I too got my car on campus. Yeah. So how did you go about it? Because I know what I did. We talking about too much dirt that's synonymous between the two. But go ahead.
But because I had a new car, I was on campus using someone off campus's address to get a sticker, but I knew people that worked in the offices.
Relationships.
So in addition to knowing people in the offices, I also knew, because I was quote unquote a good person, a good student, like I could get away with other things that other people that would not ask questions or would not talk to the right people. My freshman year, everybody freshman year was supposed to be on the second floor up, so you couldn't have boys climbing to the dorm. I had my own room on the first floor. I was Whitley. I had my beds pushed together, carpet on the floor, curtains. I was Whitley from Different World my freshman year. My sophomore, actually the summer of my freshman year, I moved off campus.
That's crazy because, like my freshman year, I think I was one of the few people that got into one of the dorms that was a single bedroom dorm. Like I had to share my room. And it was dope, but it was also lonely for me because I'm used to being around my crew. So, but that's neither here nor there.
I wasn't lonely at all.
I can tell. Trust me, I know you. I can tell. Let me read some of the comments in the comment section. Letitia Wilder said, "I was like that too. My mother put the brakes on me quick. Then she said, remember we have children. Don't give up the secrets. They will use it against us." Yo, shout out to you, Letitia Wilder. You are not speaking any lies whatsoever. I have a niece that is actively using secrets against us at the house as we speak. Anyway, so let me roll back a little bit. Did you do Did you do any entrepreneurial things in high school or college that you can recall that kind of stood out to where you are now, or kind of prepared you to where you are now?
No. So what I would say that I did while I was in college, I learned a lot more of corporate and learned a lot more of what is the expected way of doing things while building those relationships and being creative. So I was a presidential ambassador. I worked in the financial aid office.
Okay.
If you go to HBCU and you know how important in the 90s it was to know somebody in the financial aid office.
And that's after you get through standing in line for 3 hours.
Well, see, if you knew the right people, then you wouldn't, because you just knock on their door and I tell you, go to Taco Bell, here go my order. When you come back, your code's gonna be set. Like, go downstairs to finance and get your refund check. Like, you have to know the right people.
In Jesus' name. Okay, relationships again, people. Relationships. So okay, all right. So
I did not do anything entrepreneur during that time.
What are some of the you spoke about how corporate works? What are some of the core principles that you took in terms of functionality within corporate America?
So a lot of understanding, I would say, the process and being able to have something that you articulate this is how we do things as a business is different than what I saw from any entrepreneur prior to that, because honestly, a lot of what I saw was hustling. It wasn't setting up a business structure, which is very similar to what I had to realize that met better with my personality type. So I would hear things like, I'll take payment any kind of way. You can give me food stamps, you can give me a post-dated check, you can give me, like, it was any type of way of just getting business. I would even see, like, in the neighborhood, people that, would consider themselves entrepreneurs, but they were still, nothing was really consistent customer to customer. And on the corporate side, I saw how you have things in place, written down, consistent, and you don't really have, you have clear boundaries. You have expectations for you going forward to meet particular goals, and it's not haphazard. And those were the types of things that going to a traditional white high school versus even going to a HBCU, while at a HBCU, going to LSU and seeing the contrast to all of these different things. My master's is at a traditional white institution. My doctorate is at a HBCU.
And your undergrad?
Is at a HBCU.
And just to be clear, which can you tell us?
So undergrad, I went to Alabama A&M.
Okay.
For my master's at
Alabama A&M is where?
In Huntsville, Alabama.
Shout out to Dr. Andrew Huginny Jr., graduate of South Carolina State University. Okay, I'm sorry, I got a little caught up.
Yeah. Okay.
He's the president, by the way.
And my master's at Georgia School of Professional Psychology, and then I also went to Columbus State University.
Dope.
But in between that time, internships and fellowships, things like that. That's where the LSU came in, and then my doctorate.
So what were some of the major differences between LSU and Alabama A&M?
Oh, Chick-fil-A in the calf. To say, in the calf on Sunday at A&M, we did have fried chicken, but you asked. But yeah, just
so so A&M was prison.
No,
because they had one good meal.
Sunday, you knew the cheesecake with the strawberry and the sweet tea. Yeah, you knew that.
Jeez.
It's homecoming week, virtual homecoming.
So yeah, I will say that there is a big difference between PWIs, which
Yes.
is predominantly white institutions. There's a big difference between PWIs and HBCUs in terms of how they function.
Yes.
The quality of education, however, I won't say that there's not a difference in the quality of education. There is a difference in the approach of how it's taught.
Yes. And the lessons that you learn.
Right. Correct. I think that there are superior talents in terms of education, in terms of faculty and staff, at every institution, and a lot of my collegiate experience. I can't speak for everybody, but my collegiate experience is you get out of it what you put into it. So if you go hard, you'll get out more than the average student that's just there to get the piece of paper and move on with their life, or it could be the opposite in certain. But that's just been my experience. I'm interested to hear your experience.
So I think that there is a struggle that you are taught at HBCUs that prepare you to struggle post HBCU life. That at a PWI, things are so smooth that when you hit this postal, hit this thing, this struggle, you might go postal because that may be your first time because you didn't expect it. Because you never sat in those lines. You didn't know how things can hit you. You didn't know how you need to really have these relationships because maybe some of the other majorities at the PWI had relationships that they didn't. Their parents had relationships. And so they didn't realize what it took to get them those particular opportunities, where at HBCU, you're going to have to create them if you want to be that exception.
Yeah, and I guess that's one of the things that I was kind of alluding to is like to be elite at an HBCU, you really have to put it out there.
Yeah.
Especially at like a lot of the elitist HBCUs, like the Howards, the FAMUs, the Morehouses, the Spelmans. Like, in order to stand out in those places, because there's nothing but the majority of people are black there, mm-hmm. you really have to go hard. Because like in a lot of those institutions, you got the average people, and then you got the people that's really like they not trying to mess around. And so like when you say you got a grasp of the corporate structure, I'm really interested to hear like the caveats behind that, because like a lot of people don't get an opportunity, especially at HBCUs, they don't get an opportunity to grasp those things because they're so focused on getting the college experience.
So I even had during my time where my president was in a controversy, and being connected enough to learn about how a president of an HBCU has to, I'll just say, move funds without the same type of approval as the president at just across the street or across the interstate would have that latitude to do, because he is at the governor's table more than our president. So now there's a scandal, and now there's mismanagement of funds, and now all of these different things that other people are able to do, the HBCU president can't do. And then as I move on in education and learn how this happens so often when it comes to African Americans that are in certain positions can't get the game the same way as others, I learned a lot about not even just at that point corporate structure, but then how, as we say, you got to play chess, and some people are playing checkers.
Right.
So that's that same thing of like learning in certain corporations, in certain institutions and organizations, how there's certain things that are set up in certain ways, but then you also have to understand when you need to be the exception or when you want to create the exception, you got to have a strategy to do it.
So let me ask you this, and forgive me, okay, because just so y'all know, there was no prep for this. This is straight off. This is freestyle, straight off the dome. Everything is the dome may be. All right, so I need to ask you this because, as you know, in my comment sections on my page and various other pages, there's been a lot of conversation around BLM, white supremacy, things of that nature. And you kind of touched on how things structurally are different at PWIs versus HBCUs. Is that partially due? What is the most? Yeah, let me give you the opportunity to take this where it needs to go. What are some of the major catalysts in your opinion as to why things are that way? Because you kind of alluded to it when you said that the HBCU president is not at the governor's table as much as the PWI president is. And some of that is nepotism, right? Some of that is you my homeboy, so, you know. But some of that, in my opinion, seems to be... So
I think it's both.
Okay. So
one, we're more comfortable when we can relate to people.
Right.
And when you start just with the parents, yes, we all have certain biases and we all have certain perceptions of individuals.
Okay.
So when someone looks like us, then our guard isn't as up as when someone is different. So let's just start. That's a basic thing. But then when you move towards why institutions were created and you look at, and I don't want to get too much into theory, but I'll just get into when it is created as a reaction to try to do something better versus a creation of because this is what we need to do, then that reaction is always a step behind. So the system...
Yeah, you'll have to elaborate on that because
So the system right now, when you think about HBCUs and HBCUs having to do things even privately before they could be these institutions, and then how they became these institutions with grants and all of these other things that were almost like handouts.
Right.
Those are kind of reactionary things. Versus when you think about the traditional white institutions and you start going in Virginia all the way up, and the reason why they were, even when we talk about, now I'm going to switch talking about K through 12 education. Education was made about white men learning the Bible.
Okay.
So it wasn't set up in general for people to learn as all, like when we talk about the black people, it was a reaction because they were not a part of being able to be educated.
Facts. Okay.
So starting behind and always doing things as a reaction is where we still sit when it comes to funding, when it comes to being able to do many things that we would want to be proactive with doing. We're not able to do those things because we're reacting to other things.
I agree with you 100%. So just to be clear, South Carolina State and Clemson University were founded on the same exact land grant. I think we both know this, but the disparity in funding, you're talking about 73% versus 27% in terms of grant funding. The withheld information that prevented South Carolina State, which was South Carolina College at that point in time. Like for those that don't know, when you write a grant or when you're soliciting a grant, you have to meet a certain criteria in order to get said grant. For those of you that don't know, that grant criteria was not always made available to the HBCU institutions purposely. Mm-hmm. And so, and I asked the question because there are people across this world that are continually saying, oh, white supremacy doesn't exist. And nobody's standing in your way. And black people need to stop complaining about slavery because you were enslaving your people way before we were. Like those things to me are an air of arrogance and ignorance. But I kind of want to expound on where you were going, because like you touched on some things that directly are involved with those mentalities. So just to kind of bring it back to where you were, understanding, like from an education standpoint, what the things that you learned at the university from that mentality, how did that help you carry on to where you are right now?
All of those different, what I consider lessons that I learned from being inside and being in a different position than only being a student, and being able to be a student at the table with directors, even to the point of once I left and was working in traditional education, moving with the Governor's Advisory Board, even here in Georgia, and then doing things on a federal level, doing things on an international level. Now what I have the opportunity to do is help philanthropists figure out how to spend their money, but at the same time do a lot of non-traditional education and leading over 1,800 aspiring entrepreneurs that have used a platform to create an additional stream of income, to change whatever trajectory that they were on because they didn't see options. And that's what all of these opportunities have afforded me, to see other options. Internationally, federally, state-wise, locally, and that is what I think my gift is, to help people be able to understand as an entrepreneur, the best thing that you can do is to create more options. Give yourself some choices.
So what do you say to people that say their options are not as fruitful as yours? Like they don't come from where you come from. They don't have the upbringing and the background that you have. Like, what do you say to those people? How do you engage and inspire those people? Because that is a reality to an extent.
Well, my question though is, what options do you see? Because the mindset is the biggest thing, and a lot of people have what we call circular hopelessness.
And what's that?
They stay in a state of, I can't, it won't, this isn't an option for me.
Okay.
And if you don't see something as an option, then no, it won't be an option for you. So what do you see as options? So we can't just be dreaming. We actually have to know the facts. And I don't think a lot of people even understand the facts of things, because they won't do the research to understand it, because they're in this circular hopelessness. I can't get out of this situation.
The only problem that I have with that, the only problem that I have with that analogy is, like, it sounds good on paper, but I take the same approach with that analogy as I do with the whole Creflo Dollar philosophy. Like, he preaches that he's
a preacher of prosperity. I know that.
He preached the message of prosperity, but you can't go to certain places around this world and preach that message. It's not going to be received, because that's not their reality. That's not what their options are. And if you delve into, like, the deepest parts of this country, and you get beyond the color of things, and when I say color, I mean black, white, brown. When you get beyond the color of things and you go into, like, some of these trailer park communities and some of these hood communities and some of these back road dirt communities, like, the options are for them mentally are very, very slim.
And exactly what you said, for them mentally is slim. So then we have to start talking about being exposed. And this is why I go back to my parents made a decision to expose me outside of my zip code.
But what about individuals that don't necessarily have parents, for one, or individuals that don't have parents that have the financial means to create that environment of exposure?
And that again goes to, then if you don't know the options, then now let's get with someone that can help you learn the options.
Okay, so how do we go about doing that?
That's what I am all about with mentors, with when I even talk about exposure, even with my teachers, I used to tell them, like, you can do a Google field trip. If we don't have funding for the school bus, use Google so that y'all can go on the same route, because when I was here in DeKalb County, you go outside 285 in Clarkston, and some of those kids thought you were going to a different state. No, we just going right over here to Ashford Dunwoody. You laughing, but I'm serious.
I mean,
we're going to Ashford Dunwoody to the IHG so that we can talk. So, because it was like a job shadowing day, but it was because we were off of Indian Creek. That's all they had seen.
Wow.
So the exposure piece, even if you cannot, and I talk to people, not even saying this now on a local, when people are like, you lived in Dubai, wow, what was that like? Let's talk about how you can also experience that as well if you want to. Many people shut themselves down because of fear, because they feel like they can't do something. And it's simply having those conversations about why not. Changing that mindset from a negative to, no, you can do this. You have transferable skills. You have some different options. Now, if you choose to do something else, realize that it's a choice. I have slept in my car before. I have been quote unquote homeless because I made a choice that I wanted to finish my dissertation so I could get out of school, and I didn't care where I slept. I slept overnight one night at Jeju.
Which is
it wasn't fun. No, it wasn't fun. It sounded like it, but it wasn't.
Them thin ass mats, boy. Okay, all right. You listening to TODT Live, Talking to Town. I'm here with Dr. Joy, aka Lynette Chester. We're here talking about entrepreneurship.
It's the sacrifice. It's the opportunities and the sacrifice.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree with that as a whole. So let's fast forward a little bit to where you are now. Well, actually, let's fast forward a lot to where you are now. And right now, you are moderately successful. You've traveled the world. You've built a what is it? Almost $1 million enterprise. And not to put your business out there, I hope I'm not overstepping.
Well, no, that's public. It just says it only goes from $750,000 to $1 million. So okay. I'm not the million, but But you almost. It is a public that I am $750,000.
Okay, so almost $1 million enterprise. You're an educator. You are a specialist in areas of romance and sex. How are you currently functioning in all of those? How are you wearing all of those hats successfully? And from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what is driving you to continue to brand and reinvent yourself? That's the question. Yeah.
So where I am now, and combining all three of those, is I get to, as I mentioned before, when it comes to philanthropy, help in figuring out how to spend money in a particular area outside of Washington, D.C. I'm also, though, able to bring in the theory, the education, and all of those different experiences to specifically help Black, brown, and low-income children.
Okay. Because
that area of expertise was missing in that organization of how to make that happen. That same leadership quality, though, is a part of being an entrepreneur, and having 4 different areas that influence individuals to be their better selves. And so when we talk about intimacy, intimacy is not even just being intimate or sexual interactions or a relationship with another person. It's also being able to be intimate with yourself, knowing who you are, being confident, all of those, listening to yourself, giving yourself the right, giving yourself authority. All of those things internally are a part of what I'm able to still help people with and educate other people on how to help other people. So what I talked about earlier about having a structure, about using strategy, about things that I learned on the corporate side, having relationships to be an exception, all of those things are a part of what I'm able to do today and thrive during this time when, as you mentioned earlier, many people are struggling.
Yeah, it's funny because as I've watched you and yeah, there are a ton of people struggling. I've watched you be able to thrive and be free, like be confident from a standpoint of, if all of this goes away, I'll still be good because I know how to get this done. Like I'm interested to find out, and I think that a lot of people, like we talk about the hustle, right? And then you talked about the structure piece. Don't you think that those two kind of go together in terms of infusion? Like you need both of them in order to be successful?
Absolutely. But I'm going to say this, based off of your personality type as an entrepreneur, you got to know when you need to turn the hustle on, when you need to turn it off, when you need to have those certain boundaries, when you need to follow that structure, and when you can pull back. You got to be able to balance it, because if I had kept my same structure from February, I wouldn't be thriving right now. That hustle in me to switch up the game because of COVID is what I had to do, and in switching it up, that's how I was able to thrive.
So a person
some of that, when you are trying a different strategy during something that you could not have planned for, that's the hustle.
So a person that doesn't have one or the other, like how do they acquire that? Like,
well, you don't have a business if you don't have one or the other.
I mean, you don't think that there's people out there that have a ton of structure but don't have a hustle? Or you're just saying that they don't have a successful business if they don't have both of them?
Yeah, I think it's going to be difficult if you have all of this structure. When you got to something like a pandemic, you had to pivot.
I would agree with that. I would agree with that 100%. So if a person that's in the 9-to-5 life, that doesn't necessarily understand the hustle, but they want to be an entrepreneur, what advice would you give them going into that state? And let me be clear, I'm asking this question because a lot of people are tired of the 9-to-5 life. But what a lot of people, in my opinion, what a lot of people don't understand is that this business thing is not built for everybody.
Exactly.
So everybody can't be a business owner. Everybody can't. And so from a DNA standpoint, how would you instruct people on whether they are ready or built for that lifestyle? Like how would you, in terms of like guiding them into whether that's even a place that they really want to go with it?
So I think you have to do some type of, and I don't want to say a trial and error, but you have to find your why, and then you have to find your market. And when your why matches the need of that market, and you see that market is wide enough for you to continue to feel more and more needs, then all of the sacrifice that comes with being an entrepreneur, your why, your passion is going to push you through that. But if that sacrifice is not strong, or if your why is not strong and that sacrifice is just, I'm not going to go out with my friends every night. I'm just going to, if you doing that type of stuff,
right,
it's not structured enough. It's not going to push you through. You're not going to see the results that you want. And so what happens with most people when they get confused, when they don't have enough of the passion to get past those obstacles, they fall back on what they know. And that's how they get stuck back in those 9-to-5s.
Gotcha.
But those people that really have that passion, and it's like, okay, this didn't work this time. Nah, I got to try it a different way. Nah, I got to do something different. Those are the people that are going to end up finding their success.
Got it. Let's read through some of the comments in the comment section. Letitia Wilder said, most people don't understand that. True. And then she said, entrepreneurship. Sorry, Letitia. She said, entrepreneurship is wonderful, but it's not a 9-to-5. If working isn't what you want to do, fall back.
Yep.
Those is nuggets. Those is nuggets for you, man. This is TODT Live, Talk of the Town. I'm your host, D. Stanford, the professional. I'm here with Dr. Joy. Glad to have you. We're not gonna keep you too much longer. We rolling up on the hour mark, and it is officially 12:45 on the East Coast. For those of you that don't know that's tuning in, we're gonna get into some of the more unadulterated conversation. Is there anything that you want to give to the viewers before we get into the stanky stuff?
Ain't nothing stanky, but what I will say when reading that comment though made me think about something that I mentioned earlier to you about how I look at entrepreneurship as having a child.
Right.
And birthing, creating your business plan, getting your structure together, figuring out your why, figuring out what you want to do, all of that takes phases. Finding your market, being able to test where you're good, how you need to connect, what's your brand. All of those things are things that when you are figuring it out and you say, even like, my baby is born and we're like about to start figuring out eating and figuring out how to hear and pay attention to certain sounds. All of those things, even that you think about with a child growing up, is the same thing that you have to go through with your business. Sometimes you're going to fall. Sometimes you're going to spit up. Sometimes like there's certain things that are going to happen. But taking that whole analogy to being in a 3 or 4-year-old Head Start preschool program, continuing to grow with your business, continue to learn, train, switch things up. When you start thinking about kindergarten, when you start thinking about now, my organization is moving into its 8th year and it sustains itself. And when you think about in traditional education, children learning to read up until grade 2, but then when you get to that 3rd grade, that's when you're expected to know how to read, and now you read to learn. That is exactly what happened with my organization. Being able to now have it sustain itself without me, because I've got other leaders now, that's what you want. But that's an 8-year process. It doesn't happen overnight. You see the growth, you switch it up, you build, you expand, you strategize. All of those different things are the same things that you do with kids.
So how long, I know we said we were going to move on, but how long was it before you started seeing light at the end of the tunnel with regard to building from knowing that you wanted to have an organization to knowing what type of business that you wanted to be involved in, to getting into that business, learning the business, to building an infrastructure, to guiding to seeking out leaders to help build your business and guiding those leaders within your vision to now?
So I don't think you can put I don't think you can put a time on like there was light at the end of the tunnel. So I can tell you like different phases because my why changed. My why for starting the business changed to wanting from wanting to do the work myself to wanting to then see other people do it and it could reach more people.
Why did that change? Why did that change take place?
Because then I saw the vision of being able to have more people do it. That's less of me having to do it, and more individuals able to reach more people.
So it's a win-win for you.
Absolutely.
Because you're empowering people by teaching them the values and the principles of building their own business. Not necessarily, I get it now. So it's not necessarily because you want them to get more money, but you want them to understand how to fish to an extent.
So they can have more options.
Right.
Because I believe in education.
Exposure, right?
Yes, it's exposure, but I also believe in education.
Yeah.
And so it's education on not just intimacy topics, but also education on being an entrepreneur.
Right.
Because you also now don't have to make all the mistakes that I made. And you can follow my structure, but then find yourself in there so that you can deviate and make it your own.
Right. So they don't have to make the same mistakes that you've made.
Nope.
But they also should be taking into account what works best for them.
Yes.
Without necessarily having to make the same mistakes that were made. Like Hove did that, so hopefully you wouldn't have to go through that.
Right.
Yeah, I got you.
And that leadership wise though feels great.
I would imagine so because, so twofold, right? We often talk about representation. Like a lot of people don't get an opportunity to realize their options because they don't see any representation in place. I spoke on TODT last week about Barack Obama changing that for a lot of people. Where I understand where you're coming from is you as both an educator and an entrepreneur, that fulfillment is twofold for you because the same thing that you're preaching, you're now helping people to realize. From their standpoint, though, the realization comes from being able to not only receive the message, but to see it come into fruition by your tutelage, because now you are the representation for them. And I know, especially from a black female standpoint, that's huge, because now it's just not about females being the most educated people in the country. Now they're the most educated entrepreneurs in the country now. So now you're seeing it come to fruition on it's twofold. So that's dope. That's incredible. Man. Yeah.
Well, let me say the second part of what you were saying too, though, was like you said, the empowerment, the education piece. When we talk about entrepreneurship, the representation piece. The second part, though, is even in my dissertation, I said everything for me that my calling is to make society different or better. And seeing that occur because it gives people options and being able to empower people with knowledge about options and whether it's what you put on your body, in your body, with somebody else, for yourself, in your bank account, whatever those different things are, it feels good. So my why has changed from something that was small to something that is now international.
Would you call that growth, or would you just call it just adaptation, or maybe you reached the ceiling that you thought that you wanted to reach, and things just kind of?
Yeah, it's growth, but I think it's more really just what I would call evolving.
Okay.
Because when I think about growth, I still think that it's going like just up.
Right.
But this is, I think, more of a pivot because I didn't see this even as an option. So, all transparency, I have a hard time finding a coach and an even harder time finding a mentor, which is the reason why I moved to saying I'm looking for a coach.
Right.
Because it seems like I'm going to have to pay somebody. Where mentors, they be like, oh, okay, yeah, we do this for free.
Yeah, right.
Coach, no, you gotta pay for this.
Yeah.
And it's because finding someone that has experienced this is difficult.
Finding someone that has experienced this and has the time to invest in you.
I just think when I say it's difficult finding someone that has an international mentality for wanting to empower people, not just in a specific area.
Got you. Okay. Yeah, that's a lot. it's just a lot. It just is. You kind of, well, yeah. I don't even think. Yeah.
Because I can find somebody in education, but I can't find anybody that's in education and in intimacy.
Right.
And no sex toys. And no BDSM. And no all the other stuff that just seems like, the good girl over here, the church, the teacher, and over here, safe words and.
Let alone been in different countries doing this thing. That's
that part.
Wow. All right.
Get to the questions. It's been over an hour. We just talking.
Yeah. Let's jump into this. We're not gonna keep you too much longer, Dr. Joy. You're listening to TODT Live, Talking to Town. I'm your host, D. Stanford, the professional. I'm here with Dr. Joy. Again, wow. All right, so let's jump into some of these questions that's been posed. I'm not gonna put people's business on blast. Some of the questions that were sent in, we held on to them from the previous show.
August 2019.
Yep. With that being said, first question. Somebody wants to know if you've been with a person that has never had an orgasm. This person was specifically talking about a woman. If you've been with a woman that doesn't know that she hasn't had an orgasm, but doesn't know that she has never had an orgasm, how do you help her to reach that point? How do you help her to reach that point? What's going on, Dalton Smith?
So you can't help her reach that point without understanding what's in her mind. So the biggest sex organ is the brain.
Okay.
So if she believes she has had an orgasm, then the question is, what is it that she believes she has experienced that's different than an orgasmic experience? And when people talk about orgasmic experience, it's out of body. It's not the same thing as coming. Coming is just the ejaculant that comes out.
So that's what I was going to ask you. So I'm glad you're going into this. What is the difference between, and I'm specifically referring to females. We all know when a man comes, you
can see it.
Yeah, it's very visual.
But when a man, it's the same thing though when it comes to orgasm.
I hear you, but we ain't talking about dudes right now.
You know I'm about to go.
Yeah,
you've been in one of my sessions before.
Stay on task. Stay on task.
Okay, yes, sir. It's your show. I always do that. Yes, sir.
So, first of all,
if y'all want to know, put it in the chat. You got to give the people what they want. If y'all want to know, put it in the chat.
I know what an orgasm and what coming is, and yeah, it's different.
Yes.
It's very different. And they can be synonymous.
Yes, for most of the time, for men it is.
For men it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
For women,
you ain't missed nothing,
different.
Letitia. Stay in your place. For women, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, what from a female standpoint, how do you, like, for me, and this is just to roll back to one of our previous conversations privately. For me, if you ask a woman if she's had an orgasm and she says, I guess so, or I think so, she ain't had an orgasm. That's to me. Because I feel like
that's not true either.
I mean, again, I was wrong then. I'm probably wrong now, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of guys feel that way. So I'm kind of, I need you to elaborate on that, because this question is global. I've heard this from various men. So can you kind of just elaborate on the total complexity of this question?
So because it is so complex, as you just stated, it truly has to be something that she knows how her body reacts when she is not in control, because orgasms are not things that you can control. That's what makes it an orgasm. It's very similar to you sneezing. When you sneeze, you do not tell your head to do this. If you stop your head from doing it, you're trying to be in control of it, so you're trying to hold it in.
Did you say that just because I just sneezed?
No, and I didn't realize you sneezed.
Oh, child, please.
I thought that was a cough. Let me turn my head
that
this
sneeze
way. So all of those reflexes, things that you can't control, is the same thing that happens when you have an orgasm.
Okay.
So that what some people will consider even as a out of body experience with an orgasm, it's not something that you're able to control. Now you can hold back and try to intensify the orgasm and hope that you don't hold back so much for so long that you never get to that orgasm, because that can happen as well. But you have to have mentally that understanding to kind of tune into your body in order to relax enough to have an orgasm, or in order to be aware of when it occurs. So even if a woman says that she's not aware or that she doesn't know, it's quite possible that she went to what we'll just call another area where she was not aware of what she was doing.
Oh, okay. All right. So,
but that's that's what I'm saying. That's a mental thing, because that can also happen without a partner. This is when you start talking about tantra sex and all of these other things without intercourse. And
can you elaborate on that? Because I don't think we got into that.
So tantra sex is just the simplest way of saying it, is about energy and feeling the energy of someone else. It's a lot of mental stimulation. It is there's several different types of what some people will consider ways of having orgasm that don't involve penetration or touching.
Okay. Oh, that's all right. I gotta roll back because you just said a whole lot right there. So when a female, okay, so I was a part of a discussion that happened last weekend where there was like there was conversation around female coming versus orgasms, and every female has the ability to squirt and this, that, and the third. Are all of those things true?
Yes and no. So when we talk about the ability to squirt, it has to do with positioning. It has to do with your labia.
Okay.
So when we talk about labia, those are your lips.
Right.
And if you got thick lips that are covering up your urethra, then no, it's not going to project out. If you are squeezing your legs, if you're not in a position where some women actually need to lift up for that, and some women don't like that fullness feeling because it makes them feel like they are peeing on themselves. So they hold back all of that. Again, when you're mentally starting to hold back, those things are not going to occur.
Got you. You speak about the mental aspect of intimacy a lot. For individuals, and I know this isn't one of the questions, but it's just something that popped in my head. For individuals that deal with counterparts that cannot mentally get into a place where they are free, what things can you do to coach them into getting to those places, or just helping them in general?
Well, do they want to be free? You got to start there, because if they don't want it, then you can't coach them.
Okay.
So if they want it, and it is, so this moves more on the counseling side, not just on like intimacy in general, because what's the blockage? What's stopping it? What's all of these other things? Like, it's not a physical thing.
Right.
This is a mental thing. So if it's a lack of emotional connection, if it is a lack of physical security, if it is a lack of, like, it could be so many different things that once you're able to identify that, then you can start identifying that this is the reason why you're having these mental blocks when it comes to intimacy.
Okay.
Like, you can try to do all kind of, light some candles, do a massage to relax. We were talking about earlier, like CBD oils, and we got CBD oil lubricants now. Like, there are so many different things that you can try, but if this isn't allowing it, it's not. And then I was at a party before I came here. We even talked about some things that are not scientific or proven out there on the market that people are buying into that might work, but you don't really know whether or not this is something that definitely will, because it's not scientific. So this is all about in the mind. We're talking about yoni eggs. We're talking about V-steams. Like, you got people that have different responses to different things, but none of this is scientific. They talking about, cleaning stuff out. But what are you cleaning out? What's dirty in there?
Yeah, that's true. I heard about the steaming stuff and all that.
Yeah, the yoni egg, like, that's mental.
Right. One of the next questions was, how do you introduce sexual toys into the bedroom with your partner without demasculating them? I'm obviously they're talking about
female.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in conversation.
Okay.
And conversation can come from, and I think we talked about some of these now that I think about it, playing songs. And if music is what you all is you all's thing, then you play a song and then you be like, what'd you think about that? And you use that to be your conversation starter.
Okay.
Or if it's reading books and you are watching a movie, like, there are different ways to kind of set it up to start a conversation about something. If you think that there's going to be an answer of bringing a toy into a sexual situation to try to help someone feel comfortable with it, that is not the approach to take. Because during that moment,
right,
it is not enough of a preparation for something that if you feel like they're going to be defensive about it, then chances are they will.
Okay. So you should follow your instincts in a lot of those cases. But you shouldn't necessarily be closed-minded to having the conversation around it.
You need to have the conversation outside of the activity.
Okay, so before you even get to the bedroom, they should be having the conversation.
Absolutely. That's the wrong time to have it.
Okay. So just to be clear, if you're in the bedroom with your girl and you just happen to pull out a toy, or you shouldn't be pulling out a toy.
Exactly.
Without having a conversation.
Exactly.
All right. Yeah, I heard that.
Because there's no preparation.
Okay. All right.
So you set yourself up for that person to react in a way that you've already had some idea that they're not going to be comfortable with this.
Got it. Okay.
So then mentally, if they're not comfortable or if they're not prepared, now the brain isn't into the same flow as being prepared and being comfortable, which is how you want someone to be when you're trying to have a pleasurable experience.
That's fair. Okay. Last question. Hold on, let me go back. Make sure I word this correctly. Last question is, if you're a person that has never used toys before, what would you recommend starting with? And this came from a young lady.
So, and this will be male or female, same situation, is knowing what you like and starting there. There are a lot of different products that are out there. So, women have 4 different ways that they orgasm.
Right.
And those 4 different ways are 4 different areas of the body.
Which are?
So in general, when you talk about clitoral stimulation, 85% of women need clitoral stimulation in order to have an orgasm.
Okay.
So if you like clitoral stimulation, that could be vibration, that could be air, that could be water, that could be something that causes a tingling sensation. There are so many different products that are out there that would focus just on that. If you like, the second way would be vaginal. That is not getting all the way into the G-spot, though. The G-spot would be the third way. So if you like to be stretched out, girthy, something vaginal, thick, wider, then that's something that you might want to use, though, something that's short that doesn't move all the way up to the G-spot. And the G-spot is only 2 to 3 inches inside.
Right.
But it's curved up. So if you want something then for G-spot stimulation, then that's when you move into something, but you might decide to use maybe a warming lubricant as well. So there's, again, varieties of things that once you kind of have an idea of what you like, then a beginner's toy is for that. The fourth way is anal. So with anal stimulation, again, you have things that are going to vibrate, things that are just going to be a plug that's just going to sit there and give you that fullness that won't vibrate. When you talk about a beginner, even for anal, you've got anal beads that are graduated. So it may be something that is a smaller one versus a butt plug that may be bigger, and then maybe you move to different types of butt plugs that move from different materials. So all of those different things are the reason why we deal with being a consultant and finding that need, taking this conversation back to entrepreneur, finding that need and being able to feel that need for your audience.
And making sure it's a passion too, because if it's not a passion, then when shit gets hard, you'll probably fold.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the same way when it comes to beginner toys. You got to know what you like, because if somebody is doing something or if you're getting something that you don't like, you're not going to give it a chance. You're not passionate enough about it.
So what about instances where one partner likes something but the other one doesn't? But that thing is damn near a deal breaker for the one partner.
Couldn't have been a deal breaker because you all are together.
Maybe not for long.
Well, then that toy ain't about to do it.
I mean, you never
product ain't about to make it happen. I think when you have differences, I always go back to communication. I think when you have differences and you have sexual preferences, that if you have articulated that these are deal breakers, or if you articulate even that this is important to me, then there is a certain way, or depending on whatever the act is, let me say this. But when you're talking about toys, there is a certain way that you can still enjoy certain things or do things for your partner without it being something that you are having to enjoy personally. You enjoy it because the other person enjoys it.
Okay, elaborate.
That's the sacrifice. Okay, so give me a scenario, because give me a situation where you're like, one partner wants to do something, another person doesn't, and then it's easier for me to give probably an example.
I'll go off the last example that you gave, anal.
Okay, I thought you were gonna go with oral, but okay, anal.
Nah, because I think the oral thing is I think the oral thing is more so of a dislike because of laziness in most instances, and that's because of conversation. I think it's more complex with the anal thing because there's pain involved in a lot of instances. So
pain should not be involved.
Okay. Elaborate.
So when the muscles have been relaxed, it should not be painful. If the person mentally is clenching because they are anticipating something to be painful, then that's a mental thing. They gotta relax that area. So there's several different strategies that people talk about with relaxing. If you are clenching because you just recently ate something and you're afraid that may be
That you gonna paint job somebody? Just say it. Just you gonna shit all over they stomach.
Right. the whole truffle butter, all of that type of stuff. Then those again are things that with communication, you got to be like, nah, I wasn't ready. I wasn't prepared.
Okay.
So if you are prepared, because that is something that is important for your partner, then there are ways that you can, even when you think about doing not even full BDSM scene stuff, just role playing and making it where it is fun for you but pleasurable for your partner, but they cannot expect you to achieve an orgasmic experience from doing this act for them. Right. Because they have to understand that I'm doing this for you. This is for your pleasure.
Right. Okay. And that would go both ways, obviously, in the back.
Yes. Yeah. Because the one thing that we also talk about when it comes to intimacy, sex does not always end up being an orgasmic experience.
Facts. F you, Dennis Holmes. Dennis Holmes. Let's read through some of these comments. Letitia,
people are still up.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the Rise Up family, man. We keep it buck around here. Letitia Wilder said, "That's how you get smacked with a toy. Don't go springing it in the middle of the grown up." Yo, Letitia, you boy, I tell you. Dennis Holmes said the shitter. He must have said that when you said anal. Letitia then went on to say, it's more than just lube for anal. That requires trust and total relaxation. And then Dennis Holmes, dumbass, said Devon Stanfield got painted on. See, this the shit I be talking about. You listen to the TODT Live Talk of the Town. I'm your host, D. Stanfield, the professional who did not get painted on. And I'm here with Dr. Joy, a.k.a. Lynette Chester, man, our resident sex specialist. We have had a great show tonight. We finally got a chance to go through her background, her serial entrepreneurship, like where she came from, the ideals of thinking outside the box, being disruptive, being the exception, understanding what your options are, and understanding that if you don't necessarily know what your options are, to expose yourself or expose other people around you or get exposed. And then understanding what your niche is, what your hustle is, and going out and getting that, and making sure that you have a proper structure in place at all times.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is analyze the game, because when you analyze the game, then that's how you know how to play it. Because you know when you are the exception and when you're not about to get kicked out. You gotta know the limits.
That's facts. Yeah, that's facts. Damn, that's facts.
So in the corporate side, I had to know the boundaries of what I could and could not do.
I would agree with you 100%. And that goes a long way too, because.
And if you're gonna test it, you better have them relationships.
Them damn relationships. All right, man. Man, we winded down to the end of the night. I want to know what your final comments are for the crowd. Now, first of all, before we even get there, I want to thank you for coming out. I really appreciate you, as you already know. I apologize for keeping you out till 1:17 a.m.
Ain't nothing open but Waffle House now.
According to my grandmother, Legs is open at that time too. Thank God it ain't. All right. Thank God it ain't butt cheeks either. Well, never mind, because I ain't getting painted on tonight.
You know what? Oh, people.
Ladies and gentlemen, I told you if your children are not in bed to go ahead and put them to bed, because I knew that this was going to go to a special place on this evening, man. Dr. Joy, I appreciate you, man. I enjoyed the conversation. I hope that the rest of the people that have tuned in tonight, despite it being late, have enjoyed the conversation as well. If you got a final comment, man, go ahead. I would like you to go ahead and display that for the people.
Well, I wasn't really prepared for a final comment. I think you kind of summed everything up earlier with my whole thing is just about having options. And really, if you meet someone that is telling you a lot of what they can't and cannot do, just start asking them, well, what can you do? And then you're able to really see who does and who does not see all of their options. And if they don't see them and you do, expose them to it if you can. Or do the research or help them do the research. Because that's really, I think, where it starts. I believe in knowledge. I believe in education. And education comes in many different forms.
That makes sense. The only thing I'll add to that is, and this is my final comment, the only thing that I'll add to that is I think that we should take a conscious effort to remove being content out of our lives. There are certain people that are not necessarily built, like we talked about, not necessarily built for entrepreneurship. And then there are people that are built for entrepreneurship but just don't want to take the leap. Those are people that are complacent, that are just okay with the status quo. And like we talked about in the recession period, the status quo ain't gonna necessarily get us where we want to go. Is that fair?
Absolutely. Madam C.J. Walker became a millionaire during the pandemic.
Preach. All right, man. You listening to TODT Live, Talking to Town. I want to give a shout out to my youngin' Preston, son of my boy Ed Simmons. He the song that you listen to is called Go. It's young 8-year-old Preston, and he's dope. So with that being said, man, everybody else have a great night. Thank you for tuning in. You listening to TODT Live, Talking to Town. I really appreciate y'all. Y'all could have been anywhere else but here. We will be back next Wednesday at our normal time, 9:30 p.m. Provided that I'm on time. And with that being said, man, thank you everybody for tuning in. Shout out to the Rise Up Family platform. Shout out to Game Breakers, HBCU, Esports, Fresh Perspective, and everybody that's tuned in. We really appreciate you. TODT Live, we out, man. Thank you, Dr. Joy.
Hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating all my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating on my life, you gotta go. You gotta go. There be no hating on my life, you